Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Isn't life just so much better after a North London derby win? Welcome back to the pod. Hope everybody's good. Hope everybody's had a great day so far. Yep, you've guessed it. We're going to continue to react to Sunday's win with a particular focus on Arsenal's formation. I thought that was key yesterday. There were times during that 90 minutes I needed to check the date. At points, I felt like I was back in 2004, partly because we were finding it so damn easy against Spurs, but mainly because of what looked like a 4-4-2 formation being used by Mikel Arteta's side. We're going to get into the ins and outs of that on today's pod. Bit of tactical analysis coming your way. Yeah, let's do it. Hey everybody, hope you're all good, hope you're all well, hope you're all having a great Monday so far. As I say, Mondays are great, aren't they, when you've just won a North London derby, especially when you weren't really put through the ringer. Like, I don't feel that kind of next day stress that I sometimes feel after a game like that. Like sometimes when the emotions are really, really high, and obviously the emotions are high to a point, right? Because we're playing against our most bitter rivals in a local derby. I get all of that. But normally after a game like this, I have a bit of a hangover. I have a kind of emotional hangover, and I genuinely don't feel that today. I watched the game back up to around about 75 minutes last night. And then, of course, we jumped on and we recorded the reaction pod. So we did the match day reaction pod for our patrons, which you can find over on patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description. We put that out. That was kind of my initial reaction to the game. Later on in the evening, at around about 9 p.m., I think we went live. We broke it all down. There's a full-length pod on the main pod feed that you can find where I talked at length about my thoughts and feelings on the game. And then I watched the full game again this morning. Well, I say again this morning. I watched up to about 50 minutes this morning. And then I've just come home maybe about an hour and a half ago, and I've sat and watched the remainder of the game. And the more I watch it, the more I think, how bloody easy was that? And I put it down to a few things, but mainly Mikel Arteta's approach to the game, which I thought was spot on. I thought he was humble enough to realise that without some of our key players, we were going to have to adapt the way we play. And we talk a lot about managers having philosophies and the need to stick to those philosophies. And one of the managers who's often criticised for maybe not having a clear one, for example, is Erik ten Hag at Manchester United. It's fine to be adaptable. You need to have your core principles. You need to have your core way of playing. But I think yesterday we got a timely reminder once again that sometimes you need to be humble enough to understand that when you've got key players missing, you can't have it all your own way. And you're going to have to be adaptable, change the way you play in order to stand the best chance of getting the best possible result. And that's what I feel Arsenal and Arteta did yesterday. And we're going to talk about it in a lot more detail throughout this show. Big hello to Afsar, who is with us in the live chat. He says, make sure you guys smash the like button. Yes, please do. It really, really does help. We've got Hesbon joining us from Dubai. James G says, good day, Harry, and all the likes should be through the roof today. Hopefully. Hopefully they are. Get involved. Leave us a like on the stream. It really, really does help. BX Gunner says, finally a show today with worthy content. Thank you, mate. What else have we got? Junior says, good morning, fellow inmates. Warden Harry. I like that. I'm going to start asking people to call me Warden. Benjamin Brotherson says, I'll never complain about 7 a.m. Sunday kickoffs with results like that. I'm assuming that in your part of the world, it was a pretty early start yesterday. Shaq says 1-0 to the Arsenal. We've got Farouk joining us from Nigeria. Tom says, good afternoon. North London is red even when we're wearing black. And BX Gunner says the manager is growing and learning. Big hello to Angela as well in the live chat. So yeah, look, the big thing was the formation for me yesterday. And we talked a lot yesterday about individuals, and we did touch on the formation thing. But I wanted to pay particular attention to it on its own kind of standalone episode, because I think that was really, really crucial to the success that we had defensively. So let's get into it. Now, as I mentioned, whoops, got the wrong tab open. There we go. We were given, I think, a bit of a throwback. If you think back to sort of the peak Wenger days, we did play with a 4-4-2. If you go further back beyond that, we'd have played with a 4-4-2. And it's a formation that has become less fashionable these days. It's a formation that doesn't really get talked about, isn't seen as one of the optimal formations. But there are still uses for it. And I do wonder where this kind of influence has come from when we talk about Mikel Arteta, because we often talk about maybe what he's taken from Pep, maybe what he's taken from Arsene Wenger, because those are the two most high-profile coaches that he's ever had. But I think this is maybe something, and I'm speculating here, that he would have learnt inside out working under David Moyes. So let's give David Moyes his flowers here, because, you know, this was not a very Pep Guardiola system. Arsene Wenger did used to use the system, but there was a lot more freedom afforded to the players in this system back in those days. This was a very rigid, well set up 4-4-2 at times. And when I looked at the players' average positions after the game, I was expecting to see something along the lines of a 4-4-2, because that's what we could see at points. But that looked a little bit more like this. If I just sort of adjust the tactics board to kind of highlight to you guys exactly how that looked. The average positions looked a bit more like this in essence. But ultimately, it's still pretty much a 4-4-2. You know, you've still got White, Saliba, and then you've got Gabriel and Timber. Partey was dropping in between the centre-halves at times. Jorginho in the central midfield area. Havertz and Trossard were kind of like the front two. Saka pushed up slightly higher on that right-hand side than Martinelli in terms of his average position. But the idea and the plan was, especially off the ball, to make things look a bit more like this. 4-4-2 is what we went for. A lot of the debate in the lead up to the game was, who's going to play as the forward? Would it be Trossard? Would it be Havertz? Would Havertz be asked to play in a more sort of deeper role? And I think the truth is that none of us really got that right. I got the 11 right in terms of what we saw, but a lot of us thought that Havertz was going to play more like a midfielder. I don't think many of us accounted for the fact that we were going to play with what looked way more like a 4-4-2. And it shouldn't be a total surprise, because we have played with a 4-4-2 before. We've seen Mikel Arteta adopt this shape on many occasions. But this time, he adopted it from the start. He recognised the vulnerabilities that we have because of the personnel that was unavailable to us. And he opted to do something that was going to put us in a much stronger and healthier position to go on and win the game. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of playing this way and why I think that Mikel Arteta opted for this approach. So first of all, the distances between the midfield and the defence when you play this way are much smaller. You probably need to adopt a bit more of a direct approach when you're attacking, because it's really, really difficult to flip from a narrow, deep lying 4-4-2 and then try and create that kind of attacking impetus that we do when we play with our more regular formation. So I do think that there was a sacrifice that needed to be made in order to make this happen. But the benefits are as follows. First of all, smaller distances between your midfield and your defence. When you've got players like Partey and Jorginho playing, who aren't the most mobile in the world, what you want to do as an opposition is you want to drag them out of position, and then you want to try and expose these spaces, the spaces in between the lines, and you want to try and get at Arsenal's back four as much as you possibly can. Now, in Gabriel and Saliba, we've got two centre-halves that are bloody good in 1v1 duels, so you wouldn't be too worried if they were able to breach that Jorginho-Partey pivot on a few occasions. But ideally, you want those distances to be smaller and to basically shut down those spaces in between the lines so that you can not just have your centre-backs better protected, but you can also offer follow-up cover to Saliba, to Partey, I beg your pardon, and to Jorginho, who could be overrun at this point in their careers. So that's one of the benefits. The smaller distances between our midfield and the defence, less room in between the lines for us to be exposed. I think what's key to playing this way is that your wingers do their job. And I think that the wingers were brilliant yesterday. And I know that a lot of the focus has been on some of the defensive players, and obviously Big Gabby, who scored the winning goal, and we'll come on to talk about that in a bit. But two of the unsung heroes yesterday were Martinelli and Saka, because what they had to do was they had to push right up when Arsenal were on the attack. But they also had to make sure that they were back and deep enough when we needed them to be a part of that flat midfield four. They had to be narrow and compact enough to protect Jorginho and Partey from being dragged out into wide spaces. But they also had to have that athleticism to get up and alongside Trossard and Havertz when Arsenal did adopt those more direct balls and try to go longer that way. So if you've got 4 men across the midfield rather than 2 or sometimes 3, then you have greater pitch coverage, right? You cover a much larger portion of the pitch, and when you decide to adopt a more narrow shape, as we saw on many occasions, you're congesting that middle third of the pitch with even more bodies, which makes it harder for Tottenham, who we know love to play through the middle, to play through. So that was really, really important, I thought. Wider pitch coverage being the main benefit there. I thought that another benefit to us playing this way yesterday was Jurrien Timber, in my opinion, looked way more comfortable. And I've watched the game back now, I can say that comfortably. He looked way more comfortable when he wasn't being asked to go into the midfield. He looked way more comfortable when he was asked to simply play as a fullback. I said this on the main pod yesterday. I talked about it in quite a bit of detail. I said that this is a guy who would come in predominantly as a centre-back. And at Arsenal, he's being tasked with playing as a fullback. And playing a fullback, whether you play on the right or the left, the principles are the same. You've got to adapt to playing with your other foot, and that can at times be challenging and quite tricky, but generally the principles are the same. When you bring him in as a left back and then ask him to play in this kind of inverted role, then that can bring challenges and confusion, and sometimes he can get in other people's way. I felt he got in Partey's way on a few occasions against Villa, and it was very clear that we weren't going to get the ball through that channel, yet we didn't really do much to change that and adapt that. And I thought Timber, as a result, looked like he was lacking on the ball, which isn't the case really when you think about his technical ability. So that was something that I thought yesterday was quite clear. The fact that he looked way more comfortable in that conventional fullback position. And that was a benefit of the system, because with 2 central midfielders who were happy to sit deep and happy to marshal that space in front of the back four, there was no need for Timber to go in. He'd be getting in Jorginho's way, he'd be getting in Partey's way, and the focus was more on him almost becoming attached to the hip of Gabriel, being that more conventional fullback, going out to confront the winger when he broke down that right-hand side for Spurs, but also being able to get forward himself, which he did at times in the game to really, really good effect. What this system also gives us is the ability to use Kai Havertz as a second striker. As I say, in the lead up to the game, all the talk was about who's going to play further forward, Havertz or Trossard. Would Trossard be the guy that leads the line? And was that the right decision, given that Havertz, when he plays as the centre forward, gives us so much? Well, actually, when you play with the 4-4-2 and you ask the wingers to get back and do their defensive duties in the way that Saka and Martinelli did, do you actually need one of Havertz or Trossard to drop back and be in the midfield all of the time? No, you don't. So this setup and this system not only gave us greater defensive ability and you know, the ability to cover the important spaces and make sure that we were narrow and compact, it also meant that we could say to Kai Havertz, go up and play alongside Leandro Trossard. Now, that didn't stop Kai Havertz coming back and helping out defensively. We know Kai Havertz does that. We know he's brilliant at that. We will love him for it. But it just gave him that bit more license to drift forward and be the guy that we would aim at on the occasions that we did go long. So it also unlocked Kai Havertz, when a lot of my fears and concerns going into the game were, we probably need Havertz in the midfield, and if we do that, we lose so much up front. We have no one to hold up the ball, especially with Gabriel Jesus not being fully fit yet. And so this kind of sorted, in my opinion, that problem as well. Havertz being allowed that bit more license and allowed the ability to go and play as a second striker because of the midfield setup behind him and the contribution that the wide players made as well. What this does is demand a lot of the wide players. I will say that. And that's why I was quite defensive yesterday of Gabriel Martinelli when a lot of people were criticising his performance, because not only does he have to get back, support Timber, not only does he have to get back and tuck in alongside Jorginho, but when we do break on the opposition, he's one of the players expected to get right up the pitch and support there. So it's a very, very physically demanding role, and the same can be said of Bukayo Saka on that right-hand side, who doubled up with White brilliantly when he needed to, but also made sure he was up and alongside Havertz and Trossard when the ball did turn over and when Arsenal were on the attack. Another thing that I noticed more so on the rewatch of the game than I did when I initially saw it was that Saka and Martinelli did a fantastic job of making sure they were alert whenever Partey or Jorginho did on occasion get dragged out into wider spaces. There were times where Saka would be caught up the pitch and Partey would have to come across to help Ben White in that right channel. And Saka's thought was not, I need to get back down the flank. He recognised on a number of occasions that Partey had been dragged wider than he would like, and Saka made a run infield in an attempt to cover that area and make sure that he was in the space that Partey had left vacant, because, as we keep saying, Spurs want to go through the middle. And they were trying quite a bit, I felt, at times, to drag players out of position. There was a lot of dribbles, particularly from Son, that I think were designed to bring people out of position rather than to penetrate themselves necessarily. So Saka's sort of tactical awareness there was really, really important. And the same can be said of Martinelli, because I didn't spot as many examples from him, but there certainly were examples where Jorginho went out searching or pressing a ball high up the pitch, and Martinelli would come across and fill in for him as well. So just that awareness of what it takes to be defensively sound, and the fact that everybody understands their role and that they're in it together and that they need to get each other out of predicaments when those predicaments arise, was really, really encouraging and a really, really positive thing to see. So yeah, look, lots of protection afforded to the players that were maybe a little bit vulnerable going into this game. And speaking of protection, you should check out NordVPN. NordVPN is the VPN service that I would recommend, honestly, and I'm not just saying this because they're supporting the podcast. I genuinely use this service pretty much most days of my life because I think it's fantastic. And with the Chronicles of a Gooner, you can get access to an exclusive deal that will give you a mega discount plus 4 extra months for free at the end of your plan. So why might you want NordVPN? Well, it offers you protection online because it hides your online identity. It puts an extra layer of protection in between yourself and any potential hacker or anyone seeking to gain any information, which is obviously very, very helpful this day and age. But it also gives you the ability to change your location virtually, of course, with the click of a button. Like, it's not going to take you on holiday to Dubai just by clicking a button, but it does almost fool the internet into thinking that you are accessing it from whatever part of the world you select. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, you can access content, streams, films, videos, you name it, that isn't normally available in your territory by selecting one that it is available in. You can stream things that wouldn't be available in your country otherwise and use NordVPN to access that information, that content, whatever you want to call it. So for me, it's really, really handy. I love to watch football from abroad, and we don't always have access to it here in the UK. We don't even always have access to the Premier League, which is mad to me. But through NordVPN, I'm able to access everything I want. And knowing that I have that added layer of protection as well, to me means a lot because, as I've said to you guys on many occasions, my business basically is reliant on the internet. So why wouldn't I want to browse it with that extra peace of mind? You can use it on iPhones, iPads, tablets, laptops, PCs, you name it, you can use it. NordVPN.com/Chronicles AFC. Mega discount available to you, our dear listeners, and you can get 4 months extra at the end of your plan should you choose to use it. So, yeah, do check it out. We're going to get back to the tactical chat in a minute. Let's just go over to the live chat box and see what you guys are saying. Remember, if you haven't done so already, guys, please leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. It really does boost the reach of the video, which is really, really important. BX Gunner on Arteta says he's been in England non-stop for 20 years. He's learned and experienced quite a bit. Afsar says, and this is a really good question, why is the 4-4-2 formation ignored these days? It's probably just not as sexy as some of the other formations. Like it's a bit, I heard someone describe the 4-4-2 formation today as very Brexit, which I found like mad. It's like kind of like, it's a bit of a throwback. When I was growing up, pretty much everybody played a 4-4-2. And if someone played something different, you looked at it and you went, ooh, what is this? This is very, very different. It is a formation that isn't that popular on the continent, I would argue. And that's why I think some people call it a Brexit formation. And it is a system that does have some limitations. There's no doubt about that. But I just think that on this occasion, in this instance, when we were without players that are key to the way that we normally play, we had to find a different way. And this was the right move from Mikel Arteta. This was the right route to go down. So I really actually enjoyed seeing us do something different. And as I say, we've seen it in variations and in stages of games previously under Mikel Arteta. But this was the first time where it felt, to me anyway, like we genuinely went out with the intention of playing that way from the very beginning. And maybe I'm wrong on that. There are probably other examples as well where we were in that shape off the ball. But it felt like we were in that shape on the ball and off the ball this time. And that's why I say that this is the first time that, for me at least, it felt like that was our primary formation, and rather than one that we maybe morphed into and adjusted to, depending on, how a game was going or any vulnerabilities that we felt during that game. There are, however, some negatives to playing this way. There's no doubt about that. And, let's highlight those as well, because it is something that I'm sure we're going to see again under Mikel Arteta. And I guess the main negative for me is the work rate that it requires. And a lot of the time when we play with our kind of four, then the number 4 at the back, then the number 6, and then the 2 8s, the 2 wingers, and the centre forward, a lot of the time we like to create, don't we, what I have been calling a kind of 5-pronged attack. We get the left winger up, we get the right winger up, we get the centre forward working through the middle, and then we push the 2 8s, don't we, into those positions either side of the centre forward. And that 5-pronged attack that we use so much is quite difficult to get into when you play with a 4-4-2, because what you're essentially asking is players to bust the gut and get up into that formation and into that situation. But then they need to also have the presence of mind and also the physical capability of getting back into the 4-4-2 when you lose the ball. And it's a massive, massive ask of Saka, of Martinelli, if they're the guys playing, of whoever the midfielder is that goes up there. It's a really, really big ask, and it's really, really difficult to do. And one of the problems that I thought we had at the end of the Wenger reign was that, or maybe not even right at the end, but during Mikel Arteta's time, and I think it's probably something he's learnt from, is that we would often do that. We'd often try and attack with that kind of 5-pronged attack, and we'd end up in a situation where a lot of the time it was Mikel Arteta, sometimes it was Granit Xhaka, and I don't think he ever really got to grips with it and struggled with it, and a lot of the reason that he was criticised was because of that as well. But let's say again, we go with that 5-pronged attack. We often left ourselves like this. And sometimes we push the fullbacks on too. And if there was a quick turnover, an opposition side would drop the ball into one of these channels here. On either side, they drop the ball into one of these channels, and then they drag our centre-halves apart. Centre-half would have to go across. If it was the other side, the centre-half would go across. And what they would do would pull us apart, and we'd only have one number 6 who was trying to deal with all of this area of the pitch and deal with any runners that were coming, maybe someone that's in possession as well. And it was a big weakness that we had, and we watched it week in, week out, and I couldn't for the life of me at the time understand why we never did more to address that. Arteta played in that position. That position I've circled with Thomas Partey there. Arteta played that role for Arsenal. And I think that's partly why he understands so well what is required to protect the number 6. And it's why whoever plays number 6 for Arsenal always, or more often than not at least, finds themselves in a position of real kind of strength, and with cover, sufficient cover that is, around them to deal with pretty much anything that happens and unfolds. So that's the negative. In order to get into our optimal attacking formation, which is with that kind of 5-pronged attack, there's a hell of a lot of work required physically, and I don't think that's always possible. I certainly don't think that's possible when you've got players missing like we do, and when your bench options are limited as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at on this kind of 4-4-2 thing. I think it works really, really well in scenarios like this. Is it the way I want us to play every single week? No, it's not. I'd be lying if I said it was. But there were a lot of players that played their part here. I know that, people keep talking about Jorginho and Partey and the job they did. I heard the phrase used on the Arsenal Vision pod that they both emptied the tank. That's absolutely what they did, and props to them. And thank you to them, because they were crucial to the victory. Of course, you got Gabriel and Saliba, who were immense. Timber was very good. Ben White wasn't at his brilliant best, I didn't think, but still had a good enough game as part of that back four. But I guess for me, the players that I really, 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 really want to focus in on are Martinelli and Saka, because there's always talk and praise about their attacking capabilities. But for me, it's not really about that in this example. It's about what they did defensively, and they deserve their flowers for that too. So those are the two guys that I want to kind of highlight as my unsung heroes. I know Saka was the one that delivered the corner that ultimately led to the winning goal, and he'll get his props for that. Martinelli got a lot of stick after the game for maybe not being as productive in the final third as we know he can be. And that's kind of been an ongoing theme with him for a little while now. But I just want to highlight the defensive work that he did and the effort that he put in, the work rate that he put in, because that to me is, just as valuable in a game like this when you're going to suffer a little bit. I haven't looked at the stats, the distance covered stats, but I would be willing to bet someone that Martinelli would be up there in our top three when it comes to distance covered yesterday, because he really, really was fantastic. He really, really was. Just on the goal very quickly before I leave you guys as well. I've watched it over and over and over and over again, and, Tottenham fans are livid about it, and they're blaming Romero for being a bit soft and losing track of Gabriel's run. Others have pointed to Guillermo Vicario and feel that he could have done a hell of a lot more to come out and dominate his box. The more I watch it, the more I think that the whole Tottenham team are just completely rattled by Arsenal at this moment in time. And there is that fear factor, and there is that inferiority complex, and they are super stressed every time we put them in that type of position. Because if you watch it again, there's a bit of traffic in front of the Tottenham goalkeeper. Spurs have got bodies there to deal with that traffic. And they're so fearful of our set-piece capability and the power of some of our big boys up from the back that they obsess so much about making sure they don't get blocked off that they end up holding people. You could see Maddison and Van de Ven both had a hold of people. And they're so obsessed with the blockers and what they might do that they just completely ignore, the flight of the ball and the space just outside the 6-yard box where Arsenal can do a hell of a lot of damage. So I do think there is an inferiority complex when it comes to Spurs. I do think we've got them rattled. I think Ange-Postecoglou was as rattled as he's ever been, responding to a very fair question, a question based on a previous comment that he'd make, which if he had an issue with it being brought up, maybe he shouldn't have made the comment. I just love it. Like, give it to me every week. It's beautiful. It's brilliant. It's great to see. Whoops, what have I done there? I've clicked on the wrong button. I'm so sorry, guys. You were watching my YouTube analytics page for a few seconds there, which nobody really cares about, I'm sure. Had a nightmare there. Let me go back to the main screen. Okay, I am going to leave it there for now. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Chronicles of a Goon. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown of Mikel Arteta's 4-4-2 system and the way it completely nullified Tottenham Hotspur. I would go as far as saying it ended Ange-ball. And I'm sure there'll be lots of coaches now that will watch that Arsenal performance. Okay, they might not all have the same level of players, but they'll look at that and they'll think, well, if you limit Tottenham in that space, and that space, and that space, you've got a great chance of stopping them. So he's got to find a new way, Mr. Postecoglou, or Mr. Postenoglu, as I've heard him referred to today. I'll see you all on the next stream. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Don't forget to leave a like on the way out and leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform. I'll catch you then. Until then, take care. Goodbye.